All right, so we have an equation here, or sorry, a problem here, which you have to turn into a linear system of equations. And in this case, it starts out by saying you have a collection of nickels, dimes, and quarters. So we're going to need variables to stand in for the number of nickels, number of dimes, and number of quarters. So I'm going to use the N for nickels, D for dimes, Q for quarters. And the first bit of information says that you have a collection of this that consists of 14 coins. So that means that if I add these quantities up, I should get 14. Okay, that's our first equation. Secondly, it says the total amount. So the total amount of those coins adds up to $1.40. So you have to go back in and say, okay, well, if I have N nickels, what's its dollar value? Well, I would take N and multiply it by 0.05, and that's its dollar value. And you do the same for the dimes and the quarters. You know that 0.1 times D is how many dollars you have in dimes, and then you have 0.25 Q, and that's how many dollars you have in quarters. You add all that up and you get $1.40. So that's your next equation. Then another bit of information is that you get that the number of dimes is equal to the number of nickels. So that's an easy one to set up. We say N equals D. So we're going to use these three equations to find the number of each type of coin. And the first bit is to see that, well, since you have N equals D, that means everywhere in your equations you can replace the D by an N. And so let's go up in the first equation and go ahead and replace this D with an N. And we're going to replace this D with an N. And now we have two equations and just in N's and Q's, and we can simplify this. And so I'll go ahead and do that. You're going to have in our next thing to consider, we'll have 2N plus Q is 14. And then this, so that comes from this first equation. From the second equation, right here, we're going to have 0.15N. You just add those coefficients up. And then plus 0.25Q equals 1.4. Oops, my handwriting is very bad. Okay, so now we have this new set of equations. Two equations, two unknowns, and so we can go ahead and either solve it very straightforward, or you can use any of the other methods that you learned in this chapter. One straightforward way to do this is let's solve for Q, meaning take this bit piece and bring it over to the other side, and so you have an equation now just Q equals, and then you would replace the Q in your second equation with what it equaled. And so let's go ahead and do that. Alrighty, so we're going to say from this first equation, I put it up here. We're going to have Q equals 14 minus 2N. So now you can replace in this second equation what Q is. And it's this expression right here. So let's go ahead and write that down. So that gives us in the second equation, you have 0.15N plus 0.25, and then I put parentheses, 14 minus 2N, close the parentheses, equals 1.4. And now what you see in this last expression that I wrote, or last equation that I wrote, is that this is an equation all in N, so you can solve for N. And so when you go ahead and do that, let's see, let me erase so I have more space here. We're going to get we're going to first have to do things like, distribute that out. And so we're going to have 0.15n plus, and then 0.25 times 14 is 14 divided by 4, which is 3.5. And then you have a minus 2 divided by 4, which is 0.5n. And then you have equals 1.4. And so we're going to have to get all our n's together, right? And so that comes from adding those coefficients up. So we end up getting how many n? Negative 0.35n. And then bringing over that 3.5, you have equals, let's see, 1.4 minus 3.5. Let me do that on my calculator here. 1.4 minus 3.5 is negative 2.1. Negative 2.1. And now in the final step, divide by this negative 3.5 on both sides. And we get n is, all right, let's divide. So negative 2.1 divided by negative 0.35. So we know we're going to get a positive answer. N is 6. All right. So then that means you have 6 nickels from here. So that's 6. And then the number of dimes equals the number of nickels, you remember? So that's got to be 6 as well. And then when you throw in 6 into here, that tells you how many quarters you have. And so we'll have 14 minus 2 times 6. That gives you 2 quarters left. Okay, and so that should all do the things. Like if I take 6 plus 6 plus 2, that gives me 14 coins. And if I take 6 nickels, that's 30 cents, right? And then 6 dimes, that's 60 cents. And then 2 quarters, that's 50 cents. And I add all that up, you can see I get $1.40. All right.